Hi, everyone. So this week we're talking about the West Atlantic Forest region. And I'll start off with these two questions. Who were the first Europeans to trade with West Africa? And what was the number one thing they were looking for? Do you know the answers? The first Europeans to arrive in Africa were the Portuguese, and they sailed down the west coast of Africa in search of gold. So here we have Portugal, and so they are sailing down, and it is in this area here that we're looking at this week. And here we have a lot of gold that was found, and at first, when the Portuguese are trading with this area of West Africa, the trading is good. Everything is going fine. And then, unfortunately, very soon it goes south and things aren't good. And then we have the beginning of people sold for slaves and colonization and all these horrible things that happen. When they come into this area and they find this gold, the gold is then brought back and made into coins. And they use a term called guinea to refer to this area of West Africa. The gold also is called guinea, and then the coins that are made out of the gold were called guinea. This is a map here that's a better visual for you to see really where we're focusing on this week. So here's the first object I'll show you this week, and this is created by what we term the Sapi. The Sapi is just a general name that was given to the different tribes of people that were living in this area of Africa that the Portuguese traders come in contact with in the 15th and the 16th century. And it's particularly located along the coastal region of what is today Sierra Leone. So because, as I just said, we have, unfortunately, colonization and people being sold into slavery. When this happens, the tradition and the way that people were living in this area was destroyed, and much of the information about these people was lost. So we don't know much about these people that created this, and that's a direct result of colonization. But we do know that they're carving objects like this out of mainly soapstone, which is a very, very soft stone. You can actually just mark it with your fingernail. That's how soft it is. And they tend to be very small. And let's look at this for a second here. We have this head that is way too big for the body. And we'll see that again and again. I've said this before in African art. The head tends to be rather on the large side because this is like the driving force of the body, they believe. And it's not only where the brain is, it's they believe like the soul of the person lives in the head and guides the person. We then have also very exaggerated features on the face with the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And the man here, his arms here merge with the animal here. And you can see that the texture of the animal is actually on his arms so that they become one. This is a crocodile, and the crocodile here is the body, the tail, the one leg, the other leg we can't see, and then the human arm slash crocodile arm, and then the other one we can't see. So this is a way of showing a connection between these two, which is probably some kind of like really deep spiritual meaning behind this. But again, unfortunately, because of colonization, we don't know so much about this. This is located here in New York at the Brooklyn Museum. So what I'm showing you here is a person lying down, you can see, And then we have these lines across where the mouth would be. And this could indicate a beard. It could also, though, indicate some kind of binding that maybe took place during a ritual when a king was being put into place. There was some kind of ritual with binding that took place. Now, in the area today, we have the people called the Mendi. And the Mendi have found lots of these small soapstones. Again, they're only a couple inches. And they have unearthed them when they're farming. And they now believe that they hold some kind of like spiritual protection and good luck. So they actually will find them and then they bury them in the fields when they're planting their crops to bring a good harvest. The next thing I'm showing you is a head, as you can see, and we're still looking at the Sapi, which again is a general term for this area because the history of this area was lost due to colonization. So it's just the general people that were living in this area. We can see again that the features on the face are really exaggerated. The eyes, the nose, the mouth, the teeth. This figure wears an earring. Female figure wears this earring. And then the hair is pretty elaborate. It would have been perhaps braids that we're seeing here, and then some kind of top knot of the hair. And then you'll see that the bottom of the neck is completely flat. It's not jagged. So we know that this wasn't broken off of anything. This was made to sit like this and only be the head and the neck. The other thing, when you look at this, it looks like this person has their eyes closed, the head back a little bit, as though they're in some kind of like meditative trance, meditative state. So again, this probably has some connection to, spiritual world and to religion. And the last thing I'll say about this is that the way the teeth are shown, the lips are parted so you can see the teeth. There's a tradition in this part of Africa to actually file your teeth into points. And you only do this if you are of very high status. So the fact that this head, the figure is wearing earrings, has the teeth filed, and a fairly elaborate hairdo shows us that this person had high rank or high status in the society. So the next object I'm showing you is very interesting. So this is Sapi / Portuguese, because these were actually made for the Portuguese by the Sapi to bring back to Europe. And when we are looking at this time period of the 15th and the 16th century, we have the Portuguese first, when they arrive to Africa, they're regarded as these kind of like mystical beings because they come in these giant ships from across the water, and they brought riches with them from Europe, things that were luxury goods, but they also brought danger with them. And this begins as early as 1512. The kings in Europe, whether it be the Portuguese king originally or then the Spanish king and everybody else who starts to trade and colonize in Africa, expect that things are brought back from Africa. And so first it might be just salt or gold, but it soon becomes also slaves. So the idea of this gets shown in the art in various ways. One thing to look at here is that this is a lidded salt cellar. Salt was a luxury good at this time in Europe. It's not like today where you can go to the store and buy salt, a container of salt, for a couple of dollars. Salt was something that was very, very expensive. And this is, of course, before we have refrigerators. So salt was a way to help preserve things. So this container, the lid comes off of it, and this part would be filled with salt. You would put this on your table, say you're a captain of a ship, you're going to come back to Europe, put it on the table. And it's like a way of showing how wealthy you are, but it's also a way of beginning to tell a story about your travels. So we'll look at that. This is carved out of ivory, which is bone. So most likely this was an elephant tusk. Very hard to carve. We have a mixing of symbols on this. Some are European, some are African. So we have rosettes here that are European. And then we have a snake here. You see the snakes that come down? And they face this dog, these different dogs, who kind of backs up, almost like, the snake is being very aggressive to the dog. And this is telling the story of like this captain of the ship. He went to Africa and there were these like really scary animals there that, they don't have in Europe. And this dialogue or this story begins to unfold here. And on all the salt cellars, you're going to find something like this, where it's some kind of story where the Europeans are encountering like scary situations, exotic animals, and stuff like this. And then we have a soldier here and a woman here showing the people from Africa and how they were dressed, how they encountered them, and then all of these beautiful designs also that are carved into the ivory. There are lots of these around. This one is here also in New York, but at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Here's another example of yet another salt cellar. So again, this is the top, the lid will come off, and then there will be salt in here. And this one, like I said, you want to have the story of it being really dangerous. So we have crocodiles around here, and look, there's a crocodile here, and it's like gonna bite this man here, right? So the crocodiles are like battling the people. They're gonna eat the people or whatever. And then we have the Portuguese are here. This is the typical hat that the Portuguese sailor would have worn and the uniform of the Portuguese sailor. And then a woman sitting next to him. And then we again have this kind of very elaborate patterning. And the other thing to say about the patterning is that the patterning kind of mimics some of the scarification that would have been on the people that they encountered when they went to Africa, which was something, very different than what they had encountered in Europe, right? In Europe, we didn't have scarification. And the last sappy object that I'm going to show you is this. It's an olifant. And an olifant is a horn that can be blown. Now, traditionally, the sappy, their horns were like a side-blown horn, but the Europeans had a frontal kind of horn. So this was made once again for Europeans to take back to Europe. It is a carved tusk. And so again, this is ivory, very hard material to carve. It was carved in the late 15th century. And it can be blown on this end to make noise. Now, if we look at this, I put it here so you can have a better view, close-up of some of these carvings. You will see that the carvings actually are of European images. So we have, and actually not only European images, but also Christian images and mystical beasts and stuff. So we have here, it begins to look very Catholic, and we have the writing here, which is European writing, and this crest of arms. So again, these are going to be made as luxury goods that then are traded and brought back to Europe. And it's a way to say like, oh yeah, I went to Africa, and oh yeah, I had this great adventure. And it's a status symbol to have this. All right, so this is ending the section on SAPI, and I'll pick this up with the next video.